So please note down your questions, and we'll have a series at the end.
All right, let's go. So I guess first of all, hats off to Chris and Scott. This has been like one of the, I think my favorite event that I've ever been to. It's been a blast. Yeah, give them a hand. It's so much planning, so much effort. It's, yeah, a major undertaking. So yeah, my name's William. I work for a company called Alkira. My history, so I've been with Alkira for 2 years. My history is network engineering, network architecture. On the enterprise side though, so I've tried to do this automation thing many times over the years, and yeah, mileage varied. So first thing I want to look at is, you can't even discuss automation and networking without saying something about culture. It's the core. So we'll talk about culture a little bit. And then I want to take a look at, network management historically and like really fundamentally how it differs from cloud. Cloud is very different. So what are the actual differences at a mechanical level? And then I want to look at one API to rule them all. There's going to be some dark Lord of the Rings undertones in this slide deck. So I don't know if you know who Phil Gervasi is. He's throwing memes out everywhere like whoosh. And, so I've taken a cue from him and I have some memes in here. I'm going to see how it goes. So I don't know if you remember from the first Lord of the Rings movie. I remember sitting in the theater, and I remember when Gandalf the Grey walked out through the data center, and his hands were like gliding along the fibers, and everybody in the movie theater was just clapping and cheering. Gandalf the Grey, great. And he said, automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency, and that's about where every large enterprise is, because they've been around for a long time. There's a lot of people, a lot of process, a lot of things that have to be ironed out. There's no easy button for this anywhere. So understanding those things and knowing to focus on those things and getting an idea of where you're at and like where you need to go, very critical. Culture, 100%. Honestly, I personally think that's where the big problem of adoption comes from. There's a lot of cultural challenges. So let's look at some network management historically. So being that this is a big room full of a whole bunch of network engineers, I think you all know what complex means. But if you look in dictionary.com, characterized by a very complicated, involved arrangement of parts, units. They should just put a router in the dictionary and call it a day. So if you look at network engineers, it's a lot of human device interaction. And they're doing a lot of things. They're touching a lot of different platforms out there. I once worked for an acquisition-heavy company, and we had 3 firewall vendors. And one does not simply flip a switch and migrate, to one firewall vendor. It's much more complicated than that. So, with that being said, network teams have a ton of different solutions. They have a lot of tool sprawl. Whether they're generating configs or they're using some box solution to manage certain parts of the network. So they have a lot of different solutions. And then all the different interaction surfaces that you're dealing with across all these platforms. If you go and you talk to the cloud team, everything's API. You go and you talk to another team and it's like, okay, we're using, pexpect or something like that, Ansible, this or that, or, these devices only listen on these things. So, to kind of summarize this slide, you have network teams that are fighting fires all the time, and there's a lot of expectations. They're dealing with so many different devices and platforms, and they have a ton of solutions that they're using to do it, and there's so many interaction surfaces. And I think this is why it's a complex problem to solve at the end of the day. And another thing, so when you're dealing with physical hardware, obviously, this is mutable. You're looking at runtime automation. So I guess just give an example, like there was a project I was working on. So I had a 5K refresh in a data center. So I unboxed the 5Ks. There was a procurement process. We racked and stacked those suckers. And then I'm going around and I'm putting a base configuration on these things. And then, next day I have Ansible Tower, and then I'm putting the rest of the configuration on it. And then all the subsequent configurations over time that get added to this. It's runtime configuration. I have these devices, they're running in production on my production network, and I'm incrementally making changes to them over time. And this is where, so I eventually got tired of fighting fires on the network side and just seeing this lack of progress, specifically in automation, and not being able to have the time to properly design. And I jumped ship and went to cloud. I was like, I want to get on the cloud side. The waters are much nicer over there. Whether that's true remains to be seen. And another thing too, so the mindset. So traditional network operators, you talk to anybody, and we're thinking about platforms, device types, OS versions, and there's so many of these things everywhere. And it's kind of like the pets versus cattle thing all over again. But then you jump into cloud, and things are different. These older connection methods are largely replaced by APIs. You have these API protocols, and these really enable. They give you a blueprint, and they give you consistency. So the responses you're getting, the payloads that you're constructing. You're maybe using REST. Not to say it's a perfect world. There's good and bad APIs at the end of the day, but it's more structured and it's more standardized and thus easier to parse and do things with. And then there's more, abstractions. So I kind of went from doing everything in general purpose programming languages to Ansible at some point, and now in the cloud world, Python is Terraform is huge. So, Terraform, even some companies that have been around for a long time, Juniper. I was watching Cloud Field Day or Tech Field Day a few months ago, and they released a Terraform provider for Apstra. So this isn't something that's just a small thing. It's a big shift in the industry. This move towards more robust APIs. And then this was one thing where my mind started shifting over time, over a few years, is okay, we're building this automation, and we're thinking in terms of instead of OS device types and things, we're looking at the whole network that underpins an application environment. So that slowly starts to change, and I slowly started getting to that cattle sort of mentality. So one API to rule them all. I don't know if you remember in Lord of the Rings when Boromir at the Council of Elrond came out, and he looked at everybody and said, "One does not simply build one API to rule them all." And actually, what he really said was, "One does not simply walk into Mordor." But you know what? If you watch these movies, you know what the hobbits did? They walked right into Mordor, right through the front gate. Or it wasn't through the front gate. I think it was through the back somewhere. I can't remember. But yeah, they walked right in. So, honestly, to be clear, I would rather walk into Mordor than try to build one API to rule them all, because I honestly don't think it's ever going to happen. And should we even think about that? Should it be a conversation? Probably not. What can happen, though? So what can we do? So the more and more that APIs get adopted by lots of vendors, you have very distinct infrastructure domains. Say just connect. Let's just keep it simple: connecting networks, connecting VPCs, VNets, SD-WAN, IP, all these different things. You have a lot of different vendors out there. A lot of them have really upskilled, and they're getting in the API lanes. And you have a lot of vendor-to-vendor integrations. And I've actually seen a lot of big enterprises that actually build out all this automation on their own. They, have a lot of engineering talent. They, really move the mark for their organization on keeping on top of these things. But a lot of times, network engineering teams are understaffed, and there's only so much you can do. And that's where looking at, okay, we're never going to get to some point where we build one API to rule them all, but maybe we can have integration layers for subsets of infrastructure domains. And this is kind of where I work now, Alkira. This is kind of what, the approach that we take, where, we have integrations with all, you know, the cloud providers or maybe Cisco, Infoblox, whatever it is, and then we have our API, our Terraform provider, and, you know, we give that customer a single interaction surface to where, yeah, they're still doing all the work, but they have less touch points, less interaction surfaces, and a little less friction operationally. And this is, you know, something that I've, you know, personally seen. Like, I know iTential's here, we're partnered with them, but like when you get to that point where you have these APIs, and I remember long time ago, there was one feature request. We were working with a vendor, and the old way of doing things like hardware boxes, OS types, and when programmability was not a big thing, doing vendor-to-vendor interactions at that point was really hard. They took a really long time, even if they got done in the first place. With API stuff, with the standardized data structures and everything, doing these integrations is a lot more seamless. It's quicker, and yeah, it just provides, you know, more value in simplifying things. And this is only one way to do it. There's many ways to approach it. This is just, and this is, you know, this is what we're seeing now in the network and what we're doing. But other disciplines have done this a long time ago. Like, you know, look at like the Slack ecosystem, or like all these other ecosystems where they've been building stuff on top of APIs for a long time, and they've built these robust ecosystems. They have all these integrations. And it's worked out really well for all these other disciplines. You know, why is network so different? And maybe it is a little bit different, but, you know, we still need to try to move that bar. And that's all I got. 10 minutes. If you want to talk, continue the conversation or reach out. These are my tags. Thank you.
Thanks, William.